Nick, do you respond? I've heard somebody try to contact your office and they didn't respond, either your aide or yourself. How do you respond? It's just a form response. Thank you for the contact, or do you respond to people's questions?
Yep. So we do respond to emails most of the time. If I can't get to emails, my staff they look at them, and our goal is to always get back to everyone within 48 hours, just so that you can get what you need as well.
And you mentioned that transit is a big focus. What transit currently is up there? Public transit up there that you're going to know about? And what transit are you going to add, since that's a major focus?
It is a golf course right now, so like there isn't any transit on it.
Thank you.
Maybe Monty they can share a bit about like maybe potential bus lines that are already operating right on Hillcrest.
I didn't know if you actually had conversations about that, or you had some planning about that, but it sounds like that's just in the theory and the obvious.
Yeah. Yep. Well, transit is a huge topic around this, and so if you all are interested in that, like continue sharing that info to folks to in the port and also our office.
The best one I found coming in would be to share it with the technical advisory committee, but they don't even, they don't have any minutes, they don't have any, they're when they're meeting, and they're the ones making all the decisions. How do we get information about the technical advisory committee for actually making decisions? I'd like to see a video, or at least be able to show up and see what's going on.
Yeah, they do have their info published. I'm sorry, I know you have a lot of questions. I just want to make sure we get to everyone.
I just want to know so in the future.
And also, especially during the breakouts, you can ask a lot of questions and share input too.
Yeah, but are you going to stay the whole time, or are you going to?
Yep, I'll be here the whole time. Yeah, yep.
Very end.
Yeah, yep, I'll be here till the end. Yeah, so we can find out info. I mean, if there's something. I've been at the virtual ones, and my staff we've like delegated, who would come to which one.
Oh, I didn't know about some stuff.
Yeah, we have the virtual ones.
Are they on your recorded?
Yep, they were the public hearing ones that the city put on. So yes, they were recorded and they are available on the city website.
Well, thank you.
Thanks everyone. Great to meet you all.
Thank you. And then, so like I say, we have some pretty heavy things to talk about tonight. So if we can hold all the questions until the very end, and then I will watch out. There are bees, just so you know.
Pollinators.
Yep, we do.
Now we could have some flowers out here from
There
the
you
pollinator
go.
in the park.
So Monty Hillman is here from the St. Paul Port Authority, and he's going to start us out. Thanks, Monty.
All right. If you don't have this, why don't you take one of these? That's what I'm going to speak to first here. It says jobs conversation at the top. Anybody need one? Paris needs one. Okay. Thank you.
I got this one called Hillcrest Master Plan.
I'll start off kind of general, and then we'll get into the weeds a little bit. Rachel Speck, our next speaker, is going to help add some community context to some of the great engagement work that the Eastside Employment Exchange has been doing in partnership with a lot of the community organizations that serve this community. The Port Authority does believe, and it's been our history, it's been our track record since the early 90s, since the modern brownfield era, that these formerly contaminated industrial properties, in this case non-quite industrial property, but contaminated, a brownfield we would call it, can be redeveloped and bring good paying businesses in with good paying jobs that blend into the local community. When I started this work 20 years ago, I was working in the North End and Frogtown neighborhoods. The port built 2 business centers, light industrial jobs came in, companies like Warner Stallion, Summit Fire Protection, in some cases right across the street from single family homes. What we heard at the time and what we believed then when I was working in community and now at the Port Authority is that these are investments, substantial investments by these companies. They upkeep these properties, they maintain them. They have workers there sometimes 5 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week, sometimes 3 shifts around the clock, help keep eyes on the street, and the property owners appreciate their partnerships with their resident neighbors who help keep their eyes on their businesses when they're not there over the weekends and in the evenings. What we do find across the city of St. Paul and on the east side is that unemployment and poverty rates are well above the national average. Obviously, some neighbors are thriving and have solid single-family homes and good jobs and ways to experience joy. And unfortunately, we also know that many of our neighbors and friends in our community are suffering, oftentimes because of systemic inequities that have plagued our economy for generations. At the port, we believe the best pathway out of poverty is a good job. Some mayor, a few mayors ago, used to say the best housing program is a jobs program. One of the Colemans, I can't remember which one. And not just any job. This gentleman and I were talking earlier today that some of the retail businesses' wages have increased as we've seen labor pressure tighten in the marketplace. That is true. Are you going to make a career and support a family and buy a home off of that retail job? Probably not, even though that wage might be correct. The pathways, and as we go through some of the companies that locate in our business centers, we can talk about what they do and understand that they like to hire locally. It's better for their business if their employees can get to work, given tough transportation implications, snow, etc. And they also like to promote from within. So we're going to share some of those stories with you today. There is demand for light industrial jobs on the east side. Chuck Repke, God rest his soul, told us early on, you know, Monty, the biggest employer in District 2 is Cub Foods. There are 23,000 residents in this district and only 2,000, 3,000 jobs. So this neighborhood is a net exporter. Rachel's going to share some survey information from over 500 people about what folks in this community think about having to travel for work. I think as many of us have experienced remote work situations over the path of pandemic, we've realized what life can be like without a massive commute and rush hour traffic. It's kind of a game changer.
Or the district.
We're going to just keep rolling here and we'll get to your questions at that.
Okay. It'd be good to know what area you're talking about so we could understand.
District 2 I'm talking about.
Okay, thank you.
Hillcrest, we know, is centrally located within the metro region. It provides access to a local workforce, easy access to the freeways. 55 and 5 is kind of the common logistics lingo. Companies want to be going 55 miles an hour within 5 minutes. You can get there about there, going north or south, 36 or 94. And the visibility potential off of McKnight Road is very attractive to the types of companies we try to attract to the sites. So, that's a big picture. And one more big picture, and I'll pass this around. We're outside, thank God, but it's a little small for folks. And it's titled Light Industry, What It Is and What It Isn't. Obviously, we're not bringing smokestacks and heavy industry, otherwise known as sort of I2 and I3 uses and a zoning parlance to this community. That's just not happening. That's not what the Port Authority does. Heavy industry in the Port Authority's world is clustered in our heavy industrial river terminals where we need to get commodities into the city. Cement doesn't exist in Minnesota. We have to get it up the river in barges, otherwise we can't make concrete. We can't build anything. Fertilizer, we need to get to the crops. Grain, we need to get out to international markets. But really, the I2 and I3 zoning in the city is primarily in very few places. That is not what's going to happen. Over here on the left side, these are actual pictures of actual people working in actual Port Authority business centers. I should say there are 21 Port Authority business centers around the city of St. Paul. There are over 550 companies in them. They employ over 25,000 people. So it really is the commercial industrial backbone, kind of the unseen commercial industrial backbone of the city of St. Paul. You'll drive down Energy Park Drive and probably wouldn't know that it was a Superfund site that the port cleaned up in the 80s. And now there's over 2 million square feet of development, a couple thousand jobs, etc. So you'll see our little logo and a little monument sign. We generally clean up the land, install the infrastructure, make it attractive to private investment, who then generally buys the land, builds the buildings, brings their workforce to our community. Another great example closer to the east side here, drive down Phelan Boulevard. We've got 3 business centers along Phelan Boulevard. The earliest one, Williams Hill. Health Partners just built a 6-story brain surgery center on what was a formerly contaminated pile of rubble when I started this work 20 years ago. You drive down Phelan Boulevard, you'll go past Westminster Junction. The entirety of Phelan Boulevard when I started this work 20 years ago was a contaminated railroad bed full of train cars and semi-truck trailers full of rotting phone books, tires, salvage yards. I mean, you name it, it was along Phelan Boulevard. And throughout the entire decade of the 90s, the the entire east side and the St. Paul community banded forces to acquire that land, clean up the contamination, build the roadway. The community was told back then that we believed that Phelan Boulevard would attract 2,000 jobs to the east side. Between those three business centers, we have in fact hit that mark today. So we'll get into some more numbers here in a second, but I think you've already had a chance to see this. You want to stare at that a little bit? Can we just pass this around here?
Yeah, would you have copies on your website of this? You can bring copies of this?
Being that we just finished that a few hours ago, I don't think it's up on the website yet, but we can certainly publish it.
Okay, thank you.
So what are some of the businesses highlighted?
Yeah, what are the names of them? What do
That
they
is
do?
a great segue. Thank you, Jim. Again, this is a little small, so I'm going to walk through this and point to some things, and then as it comes around to you, you can look at it.
Can you
So,
put that chart up on the website too tomorrow?
sure we can. We have presented this at a couple of the last public meetings as well. It's a little dense, but that's frankly what it takes to do this work.
Because it's not up there yet, even though you've had it at a couple public meetings already.
I think we shared it at a District 2 meeting, which would not have been our meeting. I don't know if it's up on their website. I know we've shared it at a Community Advisory Committee meeting. I don't know if it's up on the city's website, but we certainly can make it available.
Yeah, I manage the website. That's my fault, but I will get that up.
This is their chart. I mean, this should be up on your website.
Yes,
Yeah,
Oh, you're
me
with the
as her.
Port Authority?
I'm with the Port Authority. Yeah, I'll get that up.
So this is particularly looking at what we call workforce agreements. When these companies come in, they generally get the land for $1. In exchange, they agree to a 10-year financially binding contract that specifies wages, current and future job counts, job density, and the fact that they are required to work with the folks that Rachel works with at the Eastside Employment Exchange to hire from local communities. So these are current workforce agreements. This is 2020 data. Zip codes 55130, 55106, and 55119 are who these employers reside within. And there are others in other parts of the city. For this exercise, we specifically focused on the east side. And just running across the top here in yellow, there are 8 companies currently under these agreements. They currently have an employee count of 1,208. 347 of them are St. Paul residents currently. 161 of them are East Side residents from those zip codes currently, meaning a 29% St. Paul higher percentage, 13.3% East Side higher percentage. We do incentivize these companies for hiring locally. They get a 2-for-1 credit if they hire from the immediate neighborhood towards their geographic hiring goal. So, and by the way we do our math for compliance and enforcement of these agreements, they're actually hitting 42% St. Paul hires. The average hourly wage across these companies is $22.82 an hour. Important to note, this is a snapshot in time. This is 1 year's data. So if we're thinking about East Side residents and East Side job holders, there was 161 there in 2020. In 2019, that number was different, and it might have been different people in different jobs. The year before that, and the year before that. So as you can see, over the course of time, there have clearly been several hundred, if not thousands, of East Side residents that have been employed in these and other businesses we've brought to the East Side.
Those are all 40-hour-a-week jobs?
These are full-time equivalents, yes.
About what is that? So that would be 40 hours or what?
2080, yeah. 2,080 hours a year, 40 hours a week. So a couple of the finer points here. I've highlighted a couple of companies. Baldinger Bakery. Great example. Rachel and Eastside Employment Exchange hosted a job fair there. Was that pre-pandemic? It's all a bit of a time warp.
Pre-pandemic.
Do you want to say just a couple words about how that job fair went?
Yeah, so we invited folks out to come to a job fair. Baldinger had 10 positions open. We were hoping for 30 folks, and we had 150 people show up in the middle of a snowstorm for those jobs. They're union jobs. At the time, starting wages were $17 an hour. I just talked to them last week with Tanya. They're 18 plus an hour jobs right now, starting, and there's different positions available.
That was the St. Paul company that just moved. So those jobs were
This is a
mostly
100-year-old St. Paul company that was on the West Side Flats.
Yes.
But for the ability of the port to bring them into one of our business centers, they would have wound up in the suburbs. You can't find, they built on 11 acres. You generally can't find an 11-acre buildable site in the city limits. So those jobs, that tax base would have gone somewhere else. Pomelo, one of our more recent projects, right at Phelan Arcade. If you drive on Arcade, you might be able to see their roof. They just installed a 1.3 megawatt solar system on their roof. We think that's the largest in the state, I believe, currently on a single business rooftop. They promised us on day one they would show up with 185 jobs. They're already at 230. This is a place that takes, they do large format printing. Think of the signs you see in a Best Buy, right? The big signs that hang from the ceiling that say mobile phones, tablets, whatever. Someone has to make all the components of that sign, print them, color them, paint them, dry them, package them, assemble them, get them ready to be shipped out to 500 Best Buy stores around the country. So if you are a low-skilled worker, you could show up there with very low training and very low barriers to entry and get a job counting screws, putting them in a Ziploc bag to make sure that when someone goes to assemble that sign, there's all the screws they need are in the bag. As you can imagine, this company has a national footprint. You could grow in that company from putting screws in a bag to managing production, managing operations, etc. These are not dead-end jobs. These are generally businesses that have career paths for job seekers.
And that location on the east side is their national headquarters, so they have a number of business, like IT function, finance function jobs as well.
Their headquarters, so it's a pretty broad swath of career paths. Loomis. Really different story with Loomis. The Port Authority's criteria and how people wonder, well, how do you know there's going to be 1,000 jobs on site? Well, over the last 30 years, we've developed a model and some requirements that we can calculate and project. So our historic requirement has been a minimum of 1 job per 1,000 square foot. Our actual performance, 50 deals over the last 25 years, has been 1.7 jobs per 1,000 square foot. So we do bring job-dense businesses to these business centers. In that world, Loomis built a 17,000 square foot building. So quick math, how many jobs should they have had for us to do a deal with them? 17. There you go. Thank you. They promised us they would bring 45, which is 3 times our minimum. And today they are at, today they are at 98. So, not expected, not typical, but just a great example of how we establish these our development criteria, 35% build per foot, wage requirements, etc. Those are our baseline. So if a company shows up and says, oh, we're going to bring half a job per 1,000 square foot, we're going to pay them like crap, and we're going to build a tiny building compared to the lot size. Those discussions don't go on very long. We've said no to more companies than you could imagine because they don't meet our criteria. We have grants from the EPA, from the state, from Met Council, from Ramsey County, from the city, all of which have various promises, ties, obligations, where we've promised to meet these goals. So we take them very seriously, we track them, we work with the HR departments in these companies to make sure they're living up to these obligations. And we think we do a decent job with it. We're going to bring that same veracity here to Hillcrest. We are deploying a new tool here at Hillcrest, which doesn't exist yet. When I started this work and when my predecessors were doing this work 25 plus years ago, a workforce agreement, this 10-year commitment, was created. Mike Tamale from Neighborhood Development Center, some of you may know, he was on our board at the time, and we've gone and went to the ancient wise one and picked his brain a bit about how these things were created. There wasn't a lot of data in this world at the time. There weren't a lot of best practices. So they kind of threw some darts at the board, set some standards, and we wound up with a fairly blunt tool. Today we are in the process of revising that tool and updating our workforce agreements for Hillcrest to be implemented, and really for the next generation. We've used the same tool, like I said, for since '93 or something, so it's been a while. It's time for an update. That work is ongoing right now with HR directors that work in these companies, folks that would touch them from a variety of angles. We have to make sure they're sellable in the marketplace. If we put too heavy requirements on these companies and on these sites, we don't sell the land, it sits vacant, nobody's happy. So we have to develop tools.
I mean, are they on the website, the agreements?
No.
Are they private?
No, I believe they're public documents. we've shared them at times for folks that are interested. They're a little wonky. It's a 30-page legal document, but I'm sure we can provide one. This speaks to some other stuff. This speaks to what are those current workforce agreement terms. One of the big ones is local hiring. So for 27 years, companies have had a 70% goal, and they must use their best faith efforts to hire from the city of St. Paul. By last year's count, we were at 29%. That's not 70%. We went to Mike Tamale and said, Mike, where did 70% come from? 27 years ago, you were on the board, you voted for this thing. How, was that an achievable standard? Was that a best practice? Where did you put? Sounded like an aggressive goal. Okay, well, we've never hit it. So, we continue over the years. We've had staff on at the Port Authority that do customized job training to recruit directly from the neighborhood and set up customized training programs to train 20 diesel mechanics or whatever that business might need. We've tried everything under the sun, and now Rachel's going to tell you a little bit about the most recent effort to encourage local hiring. The companies that are under these agreements, one of their best faith efforts is to work with the Eastside Employment Exchange. Rachel will tell you all about that, to do their best to hire from the local neighborhood. Obviously, we can't force a company to hire anyone from any particular geographic area at any particular time based on how their business is doing or not doing. All we can do is evaluate these companies the best we can for success, set them up with people that work with job seekers in the neighborhood that are a fit for these jobs, and try to make matches that make business sense. So that's what we do every day.
Listen to Nelsie, it sounds like it's been almost 100% in the Hillcrest piece. You're only doing 30%. That's a big difference. I mean, you got more information that he doesn't. You said this development is going to be mostly for St. Paul. I got this in the report.
Okay. I wasn't going to hand this.
Oh, what do you need? I didn't say
And have Rachel back from
referring to what you hear.
Employment Exchange. And she will be our next presenter. Again, we'll ask that folks hold on to questions until we're done with the presenters. And Rachel, please.
So hi everyone, my name is Rachel Speck. I'm the employer liaison working with the Eastside Employment Exchange. We are a collaborative of about a dozen organizations, mostly nonprofits, but also Ramsey County, Metro State University, who are working to connect residents to better employment opportunities and to connect companies to great candidates for their job openings.
So that's two organizations, Ramsey County and Metro.
About a dozen. We've got 10 other nonprofit organizations that are members, and we're actually growing our membership right now.
Are you going to publish those? They're on your website.
They're on our website. So most of our organizations are working directly with residents, either through public programs that Ramsey County runs, or folks who are just walking in looking for support. I work with companies, both introduced to us through the St. Paul Port Authority, as well as through our partner organizations, to capture information about their open job opportunities, what their hiring processes look like, who works out really well for them, who hasn't worked out really well for them, and then I communicate that information both to our partner organizations that are working directly with job seekers, as well as occasionally we are working on our social media strategy to connect directly with residents who may be looking for new or better work opportunities. We completed a survey over the winter of almost 500 residents of the East Side to understand where they're currently working, what's their current educational experience, and where do they want to be working. Oftentimes we don't get to ask folks where they want to work. We tend to give them the opportunities we happen to know about, because as we've probably all experienced, the labor market is very chaotic and very time dependent what you find out about. So of this survey, we reached 430 residents of the East Side, majority actually more representative of communities of color than the general population on the East Side. And we heard a couple of things that I think make the Hillcrest project really exciting. The first is that about 80% of the respondents to the survey indicated they were only willing to travel less than 30 minutes one way to their job. Not really surprising. Most of us like to work close to home, and as Monty alluded to, many of us have discovered the benefits of no commute. Yep, we didn't ask mode of transit. We just asked, how long are you willing to travel to work? Additionally, about 40% of respondents indicated they sometimes or frequently are encountering transportation barriers when they are getting around town, no matter what it's for. So we know that transportation is a really significant barrier for many of the families on the east side. And so bringing additional jobs to the east side is a really exciting way to open up new economic opportunities for residents. We also asked a number of comments, what do you look for when you look for a job? What are your top 3 priorities? And then we asked folks an open-ended question of what would you tell employers about the hiring process that they don't often get to communicate, right? Because they often don't feel as though they have as much power in the hiring process as a company, as a hiring manager does. And one of the main themes that came out of the answers to that question was about job opportunities for folks who are justice involved. So for some reason or another, they have something show up when a company might conduct a background check. And what we really love about light industrial jobs is oftentimes those jobs are very accessible and very open to folks who have been justice involved. Not only that, but as Monty said, they often pay higher than a minimum wage job will, and there's opportunities for advancement frequently within those companies. So having these jobs in our communities that there's low transportation barriers to, that are widely available to many residents regardless of their past, are really important equity opportunities in the community and really important economic opportunities. I think that's all I cover. I was going to be the short talker tonight. So happy to take questions on that. I also have business cards if folks want to reach out and have a conversation later as well.
Are there laws in St. Paul that require? I thought there were laws so that they couldn't do those background checks.
They can't ask them on the application. That's state law, but they can ask them if they make an offer of employment. They can make that offer contingent on passing a background check. So one of the roles that I play in talking with companies is asking them about that and asking them to really deeply look at, are you mandated, like a child care center would be mandated by state law to conduct background checks, and we all want that? Or is this a tool that you are using frequently to determine if you can trust a candidate? And if that's the case, it is an unjust way to determine that, and you need to revisit that as possible.
Can they answer that question in the oral interview?
They can't ask it in the oral interview, I believe.
So we have about 45 minutes left, and I know there's a ton of questions rolling through your head. So I know that we have Monty and Rachel who are willing, and then Leslie, if there's something that falls into your purview. So I think the best way to do this, just because there's quite a few of us, is if you would raise your hand, and then we'll call on you, and we'll go from there. So what questions are, who has a question?
Question or just kind of that I saw come across my email. I'm not sure if this person is here, but I'm going to put a kind of a report together, kind of maybe like a counter to the light industrial thing that had to do with housing, or maybe incorporating housing into it sounds like the Port Authority, that's not really what you guys do. Or is there any kind of, you led with the statement saying that mayors have said the best housing plan is more jobs, right? But what I see from my vantage point is, I see this kind of dilapidated strip mall down here. I just feel like there's a way to redevelop that. And if you're going to go light industrial, do you have the kind of pool or resources or relationships to entice developers to come in and let's put in some light retail and some affordable housing to tie into this new industrial zone? Maybe we get some bars and some restaurants and some entertainment as well. Is there any conversations like that happen to where we can kind of make White Bear a corridor?
Great question or comment. The city and the Port Authority's goal at this point is to deliver 1,000 housing units and 1,000 jobs to the site. So there's quite a bit of acreage that is currently being considered for housing. That housing is going to need some level of amenities. It is not we've done a market study. So we don't think that there's going to be a huge retail presence. Entertainment is probably unlikely. Neighborhood service retail that serves the residents and the business workers and the businesses in this immediate area is probably much more likely. And we firmly believe, there are not lots on White Bear Avenue large enough for the type of businesses, the type of footprints these businesses would require. So they do need the kind of acreage we're talking about at Hillcrest. But we also believe that investment, when I was working in the north end of Frogtown and the Port Authority was going to build its business center, I was responsible for trying to translate that into investment half mile up the road that was worthy of investment for much more probable for success. So it's not an either or, it's an and I think you're on the right track. This is going to be a mixed-use development. The city's comprehensive plan calls for somewhere in the northern third of the site for there to be what's called a neighborhood node, which means an activated public-private area, which will probably have some more of the types of uses you're talking about. Is it going to be a huge entertainment destination? I don't necessarily see that. Are there going to be some great gathering spaces? Absolutely. There will be an active park, a 5-acre active park. There will be trails. There will be passive open space, stormwater and wetland amenities. So it will accomplish some of the things you're talking about as proposed right now.
Are you doing? I'm sorry, just to be clear, you said there is plans to put at least 1,000
Yep.
housing units there.
When we acquired the site, that required the consent of the city council, and we did the administration support and a unanimous city council vote. It was predicated on delivering 1,000 jobs and 1,000 housing units to the site.
Are you doing the housing part, or is that something?
We are the master land developer, so we will be selling the land to the housing development
Do you
community.
have any experience?
For housing development, myself personally, no. Energy Park is 2 million square feet of everything from light industrial to historic adaptive reuse to condos to townhomes to apartment buildings. So we do have some history in there. At the end of the day, if you understand if the development community understands the ground up development, we certainly understand land development. So I think we're fairly adequately capable of selling land to build some housing.
I have something quick to add, transaction. The interest in doing business and building housing on Hillcrest, it is so high. Like I've already had a handful of developers who build affordable housing overall reach out to me and say, we know this is already, we're like a few years down the road from this, but we want to keep an eye on this. We want you to think of us as you are thinking about, putting this project together. And then in my presentation, Monty, you also mentioned businesses coming your way already expressing their interest in wanting to do business here too. So it's one, it's like the strong relationships, but also because people want to do business here in St. Paul. They want to serve folks who live here, and the East Side is a wonderful opportunity, and they know it as well. And part of that is like the beautiful, diverse community that we also have here that is so unique to. That's something that hasn't been discussed yet, but they're just sharing with us.
You have an answer?
Yeah. I just know that.
Even know what the land use blobs are. We will very shortly. But the preliminary informal conversations we've had with multiple housing developers, for-profit, non-profit, market rate, affordable, all product types are interested in being on this site. Several private companies, owner-users, like the businesses on that board, have expressed interest in coming to this site and are eager. When's it going to be ready? When are you going to have the roads in? When's the dirt going to be ready? As well as several industrial developers who would build multi-tenant spaces for lease. So we've had broad interest from across the
Are
development.
we talking about rental housing, or are we talking about owner housing?
Both.
And what percentage?
These have just been informal conversations with the development community.
Or with you?
Yes, that's my job. Yep, that is my
No, I
job.
didn't know who was your subordinate or your.
Myself and some other staff at Port Authority, that's what we do all day long, is talk to folks in the development community about what's going on and how we get them to invest in St. Paul.
You're an expert on this, so I want to listen to the expert.
Okay.
I mean, are
Any
these
other
the same people
questions
talking
that are
about
open?
Nelson?
Brenda, Chan, Trey.
Yeah, on one of the plans I saw in terms of your redevelopment of the golf course, I think it's important to note that you're developing essentially a green field despite the finding of all this hazardous waste that's been there moderately reflected off for, what, since 1945.
29.
What's that?
29. That's when the Gulf War opened.
29 now? Well, on a website it said 45, so I don't know.
That's kind of when
The plumbers, I don't know, they took it over later, I thought.
six when they started.
But so there's all those years, and we got Town and Country that's going back to 1888, and they haven't, nobody's died from any hazardous waste out there. But go past that issue for a moment. But on the fact that you've got a redevelopment of a green site adjoining a dense residential community, why do you find it necessary to connect all those roads for your industrial park? Why, I mean, the county obviously must be asleep because they're turning McKnight into a 3-lane road, or should I say a 2-lane road with a turning lane. Doesn't sound like a road that's inviting industrial type uses, frankly. I mean, they did that to Maryland, and, don't get behind a bus.
So let me give you a good example. Have you been on Highway 280 before, right? So about dead center logistically of the Twin Cities.
Total industrial area.
280 and Broadway is interesting. There are some industrial companies. There are also some multi-story office towers. There are also some very high-volume shippers.
But there's not a bunch of residential housing units.
Hang on, I'm answering one question at a time. There is a UP.
Are happy with a 3-lane road.
They can be.
Sorry, a 2-lane road. Excuse me. I keep using the county's language. Big mistake. So on the business of. We'll let that in the view of homeowners, though, that are going to live on top of what isn't going to be a green asset of the community anymore, except for making bank account deposits, I guess, which are okay. But do you really need all those roads intruding into the residential areas that already exist? Can't you do it in a way that you force the traffic back out to the McKnight site?
I'm not a traffic engineer, but there have been numerous lengthy discussions with county and city folks that are responsible for traffic about minimizing the impact of traffic to the west. From our users, they don't want to drive to the west. They want to get out to McKnight and be doing 55 miles an hour in 5 minutes. They want to get to the freeway and get out of the neighborhood.
I heard you say that's why I'm asking the question. Doesn't make any sense to drag all those trailers and whatnot through residential areas.
As I just stated, they're not going to be driving them through residential areas. That's the last thing a truck driver wants to do is drive down a residential
But you know what? If there's a road, people tend to use it.
If your job is to deliver product in the most time-efficient way possible, and your compensation can be tied to it, you probably want to do the fastest route, not the most circuitous.
That's when everything works logically, and we know the world doesn't always work that way. So so you're saying no, we don't need those commercial intrusions into the existing residential neighborhood?
I don't know what you mean by commercial intrusions.
Well,
there are roads.
Building new roads into a residential neighborhood, extending lanes to connect with existing roads.
In my mind, the roads that connect to the west are not serving the light industrial customers. There will be 1,000 homeowners or residents out there that need to get places that might want to go to the west.
Well, they might want to, but as some respect given to the existing homeowners, it would seem that those needs could be satisfied by creating other exits on 2 major roads that are
I can tell you this
surrounding
has
the property.
been a topic of lengthy discussion with
Well,
folks
good.
who are responsible for such things. That's not us.
Has any
Well, you're the master developer.
have any of those discussions been in public?
All right. So out of respect for everyone, I know that this is not just 2 people here, right? So we would love to hear. We would love to hear from other folks, all right? Just because we don't have a lot of time, and I'll be honest with you, a lot of folks come in here with a lot of different narratives on what they think the development is and what it looks like. But for me, one of the reasons why I think it's so important for us to have these events is because this is where we also want to make sure you have accurate information too, all right? So this is not only a time to ask questions, but this is also a time for us to get input from you on what you would like in terms of our topic here today. So one, I ask that you stay on topic because we have been going to a lot of different topics already that don't necessarily touch on this. And out of the sake of time, I would like to hear from everyone. So, Lisa, are we going to do breakouts, or are we planning to just do the large group like this?
We're probably planning just doing a large group, but at 7:30, should we? What do you think, Monty?
7:30 now. 7:30 now.
That's my best. Yep. So, what do you want to do?
Frankly, maybe it's helpful, Nelsie, if we actually just kind of went around the
I think that'd
room
be great. Let's do
and
that.
just made sure if everyone had a piece of input. Really, these were not intended to be Q&As about everything under the sun. They were intended to be topic